Because we're losing Ada, actually. I call her Ida because that's what I called her when I first met her on the bus.
Yep.
A year or two ago. I've known Ada for a long, long time. And I'll tell you, when we talk about a man being a gentleman, we talk about a man being a gentleman. But when we talk about a lady being a lady, we talk about Ida. Right?
Thank you.
Ada. This lady is something that is so special, you better believe it. I sit here rabbiting on, listening to her, talking to her family. And the most impressive thing is you say to them at the end of each conversation, I love you.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Now, what sort of family have you got?
2 boys.
3 boys.
Yeah. And 2 grandchildren.
And 3 grandchildren.
2.
2
Yeah.
grandchildren. And one is Cody, who comes in with you from time to time. And he appears on the screen from time to time. We're going to miss Cody as well. How long have you been here, Ada?
Oh, 5, 6 years maybe?
Yes. I know. I used to get onto the bus with you, and you would get off here, and you'd struggle down in all weathers.
Yeah.
And boy, does she keep a clean house, I'll tell you. This place is absolutely spotless by the time she's finished. And not only that, but she looks after me. I drop things, I kick things around, I lose things, and who's there to look after me but Ada? And I'm very, very grateful.
Well, I am going to come and have a lunch with you. Please.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll have a lunch date.
We will.
Yeah, I'll phone your deck up and I'll arrange something for when you're in here.
Okay.
And then we'll come in.
That's great. And say hello to all the troops at home.
Hi. Bye. All right then, Keith, I'm going to go.
All right, Ada.
I'll keep in touch.
Okay.
And you take care.
Yeah, there's a little choke in my throat this morning.
Oh. You take care anyway.
I will.
And I'll see you soon.
The lovely Ada, part of a marvellous team here. A marvellous team of Dick, Ada, Joe, Johnny, a lovely lady, Jenna, I think her name is, who is, they're a terrific team. A terrific team. And believe me, when you come to the Black Horse, you come to a pub that's a pub in the old style sense of the word. It's a pub. And it's there we go. She's about to leave the building. Ada is about to leave the building. And it's a sad day. It's a sad day. Okay, I suppose that we must get on with our Jamboree. Today is our Friday Jamboree. We get off to a slightly slow start, and then we build as we bring in Harry, and we bring in Dr. Mark, maybe, Professor Mark, maybe, and I am not so sure that we've got Mark this morning because his wife once we gave him the day off on Monday. Typical bloody professor. You have the day off, Mark. What did he do? He said to his wife, "Whoopee, I've got the day off." And she immediately said, "Come on, let's skive. Let's skive off. We'll take the week off." And she spirited him away to some place that is exotic and wonderful, and gave him a rest. And he deserves a rest just the same as the rest of us do. Because, we are. Oh, damn this camera. It gets me very excited. No, that'll have to do for the moment. Okay, bye, Ada.
Bye.
Ada has left the building. Uh-huh. Well, now, what was I saying when Ada interrupted me? She is a typical woman. Very good at that. But we don't have anybody on the crew here in a senior capacity anyway, who is under 50. And that's not deliberate. We would love to have a few more young people. But the times have changed. Melissa Conti, who is 60, and who I worked with first in 1990, was very typical of the breed in those days. And it meant that we were good at what we did. Okay, I fumble. I'm a bit of a fumble bum nowadays. But then I'm 84. And that I'm entitled to be a bit of a fumble bum. But we all keep going. And Melissa started off, and for the first 4 years of her career, she started in radio, as most of us did. And Melissa did it for free. And it meant that she went up the ladder because she learned her trade. And she ended her career, that side of her career, because she's also a qualified lawyer, by broadcasting coast to coast on the most prestigious business program in the United States. And that's where I met her, because not free, I may say, although I started free as well. And I learned absolutely everything that I could in those 3 years. She was rewarded by not only being the anchor to these prestigious morning business report, which went coast to coast, like 1,000 stations in North America and Canada. It was also beamed to various parts of Europe. And she did that for more than a decade. Youngsters won't actually do things for free anymore. And it's regrettable, because people go into and get a degree. And not all media degrees are rubbishable. But what Rishi Sunak was talking about this past week of getting rid of silly degrees is some of them are. And yet youngsters come with a piece of paper, won't do anything for nothing, and they become absolutely superb baristas. There's a lesson to be learned there somewhere, and youngsters have not learned it. They have not learned it. And they need to. Learn your trade. I knew he would be arriving at some stage. Here is Mr. Philip. Good morning, Mr. Philip.
I'm the perennial bad penny that always turns up, Mr. Keith, I'm afraid. I saw a banner. Has Ada now left the Black Horse?
She has left. This is her last morning.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And she's been doing it for 5 or 6 years. And Ada, like the rest of our team, is well over 50 and has decided it is time to hang up her spurs. But
hang up her mop.
Absolutely. But you know, the thing that I admired so much, well, there are several things I admired about Ada is, and I jointly admire about you, is the pride you take and the care in your family. She could teach anybody a lesson on that. But the other thing is, you know, that she was so very good at what she did. She's very good, even though she was simply a cleaner. She was excellent and took pride in it.
Well, I can assure you, finding good cleaners, it's not a matter of being just a cleaner. Good cleaners are invaluable. It took us years to find one here that cut the mustard, and we now have one. Delightful, fit as a fiddle. She's 61. She puts me to absolute shame. She's fit. She works every hour God sends. Well, she doesn't really need to, actually. No, she's an absolute dream. And it keeps Mrs. M in a better mood than normal because the house is cleaned properly. I mean, she and I can do bits and bobs, but, you know, Wendy does a proper clean. And the whole house just feels and smells better, you know. But
and it's nice either coming home to or being in a really nice clean house, isn't it?
Yes. Well, when Wendy's here on a Wednesday, when Jackie's working, I go and get Jackie at the end of Wendy's shift. So Jackie comes back to exactly that. And like I say, it cheers her up. You know, it redresses the balance. She's had 15 minutes in the car with me that has dragged her down mentally. And then she comes into a clean house and the things are balanced again, you know.
Why is it that those people who are successful in creating a very, very nice family are always putting it down?
I didn't mean to put anybody down in what I've just said. That was meant to be a bit of humour. I mean, as Jackie would tell you, you know, I do have my very, very moody moments, which
well,
should drag
everybody. Drag everybody down.
No, I don't play down how lucky she and I are to have our 3 kids, one of whom you've met.
Yes.
Um,
And you're going to introduce me to the other 2.
yes, well, Charlie was reluctant for this reason. He works for a London borough as a council solicitor, dealing with things like accounts, publication, legal matters. And having watched some of the stuff, particularly Stuart going on about Lewis District, he felt that if you were asked about that, inadvertently or not, it would compromise him. He doesn't work for Lewis District, but
No, yeah.
He's also, as is Jessica, incredibly busy. So I think if you're interested, we've got more chance of getting Jess on. It's a matter of catching her. I mean, she's working 6 days a week, really. But no, we don't. We're extremely pleased and proud of the people we've produced, if that's the right word. They're all very popular in their own worlds and very good at what they do. Oliver's in Barcelona at the moment. There's a festival over there that his current girlfriend always goes to, and it transpires, it's a music festival. And it transpires that one of Oliver's closest friends from Guildhall, where, as you know, he graduated from, Abby, I think her name is, she runs her own band. She runs her own semi-professional band. And it transpires by sheer coincidence, happy coincidence, that she and her band are playing at this festival.
Ah, very good.
Which is a nice little...
Is it an all-girl band?
Do you know, Keith, I don't know. I must find that out. I don't think it is. It may be predominantly female, but she's certainly the head honcho.
What does she play?
Again, I think she's a guitarist and a vocalist. She's definitely the vocalist. No, I will find that out. And oddly enough, today we got a postcard from our dear friends Mary and John, who have had their first holiday, particularly abroad, for a long time, because Mary is has a bad kidney problem, and for years she was on dialysis. Well, she's finally had a transplant, which has pretty much worked. So they've been to Barcelona, and they've sent us this lovely card that you can see of what's his name? Gaudi's. Where are we? Yeah, Gaudi's house, which Jackie and I have been to and paid to go in. And of course, there is the Sagrada Familia, which is the most magical place. If you catch it at the right time and the sun is shining through those wonderful windows, you don't need to be religious to appreciate it. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Yes.
So there we are. Barcelona rules okay.
Yes. Well, it's more mundane. I was thinking today that even though I have difficulty walking and so on and so forth, is that I'm intent upon taking a holiday this year. So I'm going to come down to Littlehampton and find a day in which you can get to Littlehampton and we can have lunch together in the pub that you recommend.
Oh, God, please. Yes. Well, no, look. Yes, it would be Monday, Friday, or a weekend. Yeah.
Right. That's Friday probably would be the nicest day.
Yes.
Because it's a sort of a termination about Friday, isn't there? You don't have to get up quite so early on Saturday morning.
Well,
although I do.
All I will say is that Friday trains tend to be at their busiest.
That's true.
I'm afraid. And you would. How would you do it? Would you go direct from Lewis?
I think I have to change at either Brighton or Haywards Heath, one of the two.
Yes, well, to reduce your changing and to get better trains, I would go to Haywards Heath and get the Littlehampton train there. There's an 8-car train that splits into two, and the front or the rear bit goes direct to Littlehampton and more quickly than the ones out of Brighton.
Right.
So that means you would only have to change once. And Haywards Heath is a disabled friendly station.
Yes, it's actually got a lot of ramps and things, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Littlehampton is a doddle because Littlehampton is all on the flat.
Yes, that's
So
right. I mean, it's
you would pull in straight onto the platform, which I think is step
terminus,
3.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you turn right. Well, I would meet you at the station. And then
Well, I'm going to start logistically thinking about that this weekend.
Yes, well,
it's been some time since I've had any sort of holiday. And as a matter of fact, I think the last time that I had a holiday was I went to Littlehampton.
well,
so I can revisit.
People do Littlehampton down, but and there are some really dodgy parts of it and some very dodgy people. But where doesn't have those? Littlehampton has had a complete makeover, a complete facelift. The railway station and the pedestrian area through the old high street has all been relaid. I mean, when it was happening, it was an absolute pain in the bum because we used to shop in Littlehampton, which is where our nearest Lidl is. And we basically stopped because the route we would take was just snarled up with temporary traffic lights, 3-way lights, you name it. It was painful. But that's all finished now. So you would come out of the station. There's like a conservatory, glass frontage, and then the Arran View is about 3 minutes up on the right.
Oh, sounds very convenient.
Well, I say to the right of the station, but on the other side of the road, on the riverbank, hence the Arran View. So I think, yeah, but just a day in Littlehampton, that's not really a holiday, Keith, is it?
To me, it's a holiday.
Fair enough.
If I enjoy it, I might do it twice.
Well, God, get you. You might make a habit of this. Well, let's go to the main news of the day. And with respect to Connor, who, if you remember, his gut instinct was that Trump would get off.
Yes, that's right. As a matter of fact, I was going to say, we had the delightful Connor Winton on last week, who had been in the courtroom following the case for NHK in Japan. And his feeling at the time was probably that Trump was going to get off. But he's been found guilty on all 34 charges.
He has, and that's taken me by surprise as well, because the way Connor, you may remember the way Connor was describing how the two main witnesses had lined up and had been discredited. I sort of transposed it into a British jury situation. I thought he's going to get off.
Yeah.
But no, New York. I mean, reading up on the comments on the BBC News, I mean, they're of the view that in certain states of America, he would never have been tried. It's all New York, but what they're pointing out is that he's claiming bias, but he's actually been connected to New York personally and business-wise, and still is for decades. And the Biden and the Democrats have played it quite nicely. They've simply said that the place to decide on politicians is the ballot box, not the courtroom. But the result of the case shows that no one is above the law. He'll appeal it.
Yes. Well, the analysis, I switched on. I woke up at about 4 o'clock this morning and switched on and watched an analyst from New York on the BBC News, and they felt very much that the interesting point will be how the electorate see it. They say this could actually boost him into the White House, or it could destroy his campaign, and that's how different the reactions have been.
Well, I've read two what we would call Maury poll results. One is that over 50% of voters have simply said we're not going to vote for him, and Trump supporters themselves, about 6% have said no, it's gone too far, and the shares in his media company have plummeted as well. Now that could be temporary, but no, he'll spend more of his campaign funds on appealing it, and I don't quite understand the judicial structure in America. Presumably, there is an appeal court for New York State, and presumably above that is their Supreme Court.
Yes.
But whether the Supreme Court would deal with just the trial, because from recollection, our Supreme Court, once known as the House of Lords, you didn't appeal a trial verdict that high. You went to the Court of Appeal, but unless there was some really, really strong issue of law, that's the furthest you could get. Because the Supreme Court is there to decide on heavyweight legal issues, not whether a jury got it right or not. And that's what Trump's appeal will have to be about. He'll be saying, look at the two main witnesses. They're the scum of the earth. One is a porn star, the other is a convicted perjurer. What more do you need? Apparently in his closing address, this reptile of a lawyer representing Trump called Cohen, is it Michael Cohen, a gloat, which he said stood for the greatest liar of all time. Well, Cohen, I think very amusingly, has come back today after the verdict and said, he called me a gloat. Well, he's a sloat. He's the stupidest lawyer of all time.
Yes.
Only in America.
Yes. But also, it's political. And I said the other morning, is I am fed up of hearing our own politicians sort of saying, well, he's a Tory. Well, he's a socialist. They don't address any issues. It's just really muted name calling. And I wish they would stop it and tell us what it is that they're going to do about a dire situation in this country.
Yeah, well, the election campaigns are only just beginning. You know, because as I've said, sadly, I live in a constituency where it's an absolute rock solid certainty that it will be a Tory win, or at worst, a Lib Dem something or other. But it's hard for me to take an interest in it because I just don't see any change here.
No. But then let me ask you this: is if Trump doesn't stand, or is forced not to stand, Biden will be the main candidate and the sitting president. What hope does that say for the United States?
Well, this is right. Well, firstly, that your initial statement was questioned online this morning. These convictions do not prevent him running. The actual eligibility rules for a presidential candidate are incredibly loose. So these convictions do not prevent him from standing. The other argument, the big question, as posed online by a chap who has got dual British and American citizenship, was that he used to be a Trump voter, but he had enough in 2020 of the antics. It doesn't mean he's become a Democrat, because now he says the country have a choice between a man who is really too old to run the most powerful country in the world, or a convicted felon. And let's not forget, there are other trials coming up which are deeply serious. I mean, he won't be sent to prison for what he's just been convicted of. I don't know whether they have suspended prison sentences in America, I just don't know. But the worst it would be some sort of suspended sentence with a whacking great fine. And the fine would probably hurt him the most. Because at the end of the day, he has, as we were discussing with Harry, he has to be running out of money somehow.
Yeah.
And these verdicts may well persuade contributors not to contribute anymore, either because they now despise him and see him for what he really is, and he is, or because they don't see the point.
Yeah.
So we shall see, but there'll definitely be an appeal.
Yes. I saw a clip the other day of one of the Kennedy clan. Apparently his star was on the rise and then went on the wane. Yes. But I must confess is that if you're talking about just a speech by a politician, it was a typical Kennedy speech. He was quite inspiring.
Yes, well, it disappointed me when I found out that he was actually standing as an independent. So he's neither MAGA nor Democrat. So there's no real identity there.
No, and independents do not do well in the States.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as you say, he fell by the wayside, sadly. You know, I've heard Americans younger than me, much younger than me, say that we're actually sick of having choices to vote for elderly people. You know, elderly people who, you know, where are the younger people? Where are they? And I suspect the answer is that American politics is so reliant on huge amounts of money and campaign funds that only the seasoned entrepreneurs like Biden and Trump can do it.
Yes.
and they're also very good at assassinating each other. I mean, I mean figuratively.
Yes, yes.
You know, like that chap from Florida, the much younger governor of Florida, is it DeSantis? I think it's DeSantis.
Yes.
Well, Trump absolutely mullered him. He defamed him, frankly. You know, he called him de-sanctimonious. And that was the nicest thing he said about him. Yeah, so they just destroy each other.
Yes.
You know,
I think several years ago there was a very good movie made with Robert Redford, and I think it was called The Candidate, in which the theme was that a young man came from nowhere, and got a swing on, and is won. I think it was a Senate seat, not presidential. But the last scene is that when they realise that Redford has won, and a young man is the media pursue him, and he dashes into the hotel room which is used for changing his clothes and that sort of thing, and there is just one of his organisers in it, and the last words of the movie is, "Jesus, what the F do we do now?"
well, you see that is what happened when Trump was first elected. The rumor is that his wife, Melania, who has now distanced herself completely from him, was utterly distressed when she learned that he'd actually won. It was the last thing she expected and the last thing she wanted. And it was, hey, you know, what do we do now? We're in power. What do we do? And, you know, the reality is they made an absolute horlicks of it.
Yes, yes. Of course, I think that has been a theme of American politics. One of the many drama movies that are made about the Kennedys has the scene where the anti-Vietnam protests outside the White House is gathering pace, and Bobby and Robert and Jack are together looking at this thing building, and Jack says, "God, Bobby, what the hell do we do?" And Bobby says, "What we usually do, Jack, nothing."
Well, you see, there's so much truth in these things. I mean, you know, we were talking, weren't we, about yes, minister and yes, prime minister, and how accurate it almost certainly is. Yeah, I mean, if it weren't so serious, it would be funny, but it is very serious, and we all know who's licking his lips and rubbing his hands with glee, and that's a certain Rasputin. Although I read that Biden has now given Zelensky permission to use the long-range US-supplied missiles.
Yes, I saw that this morning
to
too.
hit military targets only inside Russia. You know, Kharkiv's having the shit bombed out of it from the air and from missiles and drones. It has no air defenses, none. Awful, you know, absolutely awful. Well, you use the word socialist. I think Harry Later would disagree with you that there are any socialists in government or in opposition. And he will rely on the fact that Diane Abbott and the other, as well, the other female left-winger, they are both claiming that they are being purged, which Starmer is glibly denying. But so either Abbott is completely I
Yes.
think she's off. I think she's off the wall anyway. Anyway, I mean, I'm afraid I have always found her to be one of the least intelligent and least articulate politicians ever. But that's just
And
my view.
least attractive too. But there is no question that she appeals to a certain Corbynista element of the party.
Very much so, and her constituents. You know, it's a bit like Jeremy Corbyn. I'm in no doubt they'll both get elected. Whatever label you stick on them, well, Corbyn has to be an independent, but Starmer is saying that the suspension against Abbott has been lifted and that she has not been banned from standing as a Labour candidate, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yes.
So she's either playing games or Starmer is telling fibs.
Or they don't know what's going on in their own party.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the truth. You know,
Yes.
Maybe that's the reality. But all these definitions, you know, as I've said before, this anti-Semitism thing really annoys me because, you know, just because you don't agree with or you protest against the way the Palestinians are being bombed out of existence in Gaza, the fact that it's being done by Israelis who are ethnically Jewish, you're objecting to the violence. I think I am. It wouldn't matter to me whether they were Russians, Israelis, Koreans, Chinese, or bloody Zulus. It wouldn't matter a jot to me.
Absolutely, and one of the matters of pride for this station is that I say that we have no isms in Mirador.
There are not.
None. We don't care. It's actions and activities that count, not what you're tarred with is in terms of a label.
Yes, well, I mean, I'll give you an example. Years ago, I did a trial in Manchester, and I stayed in Macclesfield, where my sister lives, and I commuted in, because as we've discussed before, the fast trains, when they run from Macclesfield, you're in Manchester in like the shake of a dog's tail. I remember coming home one night, and I sitting in the carriage, minding my own business, and two black girls got on at somewhere like Heaton Chapel. It doesn't really matter. And for some reason, one sat behind me, the other sat ahead of me, and they talked over me all the time. And in the end, I said, could you not do this, please? Why can't you sit together and jabber away together to yourselves? It's really rude. And they went, cool, racist pig.
Yeah.
So they called me a racist. And I said, look, I don't give a monkey's about, I didn't use that word. I said, I don't care a jot for the colour of your skin. It's how you are behaving that I am objecting to. And it's typical of you people that you play the race card when the colour of your skin didn't even occur to me. Had you been polite enough to sit away from me together and not talk over me, I probably wouldn't even have noticed you. Anyway, they got off at the next stop. And this bloke came over, and I was thinking, oh God, I'm either going to get a slap here or... Anyway, he said, look, you know, I couldn't agree with you more. He said, I watched their behaviour, and I nearly said something myself. Now, he was a white man. Now, had he said something as well, they would accuse him of being racist. So these isms, as you say, they're inappropriate and overused. to mask over bad behaviour,
Yes.
ill manners,
Yeah.
or worse. But there we are.
But
So,
this racism bit, to me, often I feel is a pressure for me not to behave the way that I would like to behave, which is let's put it this way, squeaky clean in terms of ethnicity and racism and so on. Is that you feel, oh, if I do that, this will happen. If I do that, that will happen, and now that's the way it'll be interpreted. But 9 times out of 10, out of liberal people who have a peculiar sense of what is right and wrong.
well, the legal situation changed, of course, when they introduced the concept of offending that is racially aggravated. It never used to be that. So anything you do, even if it's the lowest of offences, like, insulting behaviour, if you add racially aggravated to that, it goes to the Crown Court. Normally it would stay in the Magistrates' Court. But no, as soon as you've got racially aggravated or religiously aggravated offending conduct, it immediately makes it more serious. So you have this odd situation whereby, I don't know, well-meaning anti-discrimination laws are actually empowering people to hide behind and take advantage of
Yes.
the apprehension in others who fear being found to be racist when in fact they're not. And that's what's happened. I mean, it's had an effect not dissimilar to, you've heard me go on in the past about the Human Rights Act, which I voted for Brexit because I was led to believe the Human Rights Act was going to be repealed. Well, rubbish. Not only is it still on the statute books, we're still beholden to the European Court, which disgusts me, frankly. But that was one of the worst statutes ever brought in because it told the individual that he or she were more important than the community. You've got this right,
Yeah.
you've got that right. I'm
Yeah.
Peter Sutcliffe, yes, I murdered and tore apart, was it 9 women? But I have this human right and that human right. So these laws are all well and good, but they often have the counter effect.
Yes. I mean, they're not to the common good. That's
That's very well put. They're not to the common good. They are issue specific. They're not to the common good. Let's take Harry's example. Harry feels very strongly about the change in the ethnic mixture of Great Britain. I'm still convinced that it's actually only the urban areas. London, Greater London, Birmingham, Bristol, Liverpool, and so on, Leeds. Although the further north you get, the more, should we say, traditional it remains. But as he said, if I express these views in public, as John Cleese did, for example, and I wrote to a newspaper about it, I would be called a racist. And that would be wrong. And I agree with Harry, it would be wrong, because what he's doing is he is seeing a complete sea change in the makeup of Britain's ethnicity. and its religious bias. And on the religious side, when you have a religion as virile, if I could call it that, passionate as Islam, countering the pathetic, almost Lib Dem Anglican Church. I mean, give the Catholics their due. At least they fight their corner.
Yes, absolutely.
And what he fears, almost in Powellian fashion, is that ultimately the Caucasian Brit will be completely overrun.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
And I think he's right. I think eventually it won't be in your time, it probably won't be in my time, and it certainly won't be in his. But it could become Powellian.
Yep.
It could.
Yes.
But there we are. Have you got anybody coming on at 9 o'clock, Keith?
Yes, we got Harry.
Oh, I thought he was 10 o'clock.
No, he comes on at 9 o'clock on a Friday.
Right.
And it's Mark Maybe comes on at 10 o'clock on a Friday.
And then hopefully Melissa at 10:30.
That's right.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly going to rejoin you towards the end of Harry, and then hang on. But isn't Mark's away, isn't he, this week?
Well, I said earlier, I'm not absolutely sure, because I mean, tongue in cheek, I said that I gave him Monday off, and his wife immediately gave him the week off. I'm not sure whether he's back or not, but I shall send an invitation. But the Friday has become a favourite, both with the viewer and with all our correspondence, because I now call it the Jamboree, and
yes,
it's great fun.
I much prefer the flexibility of just calling in on you as and when, and either listening or contributing, whichever I can do. So I'm going to sign off now because I need a comfort break anyway, and then I'll join you later.
All right, you should look forward to that.
All right, Keith. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. It's a good chat once again, as usual, with Philip, who is now, as he says, a regular is regular whenever, which is part of the joy and the pleasure of this camera is bothering the hell out of me. I'm not getting a great deal of joy out of it, but still, I might just do away with it if it's bothering me that much. Let's just check it out and see. Yeah, it's sort of cut off at the top there, even in the big picture. So I don't know. Perhaps leave it for a minute or two, and then get rid of it. And we've got more people on the screen. Let's go to the headlines. Let's go to the weather first of all. And it's a bit cooler today. It's only 16 degrees. Light rain showers and a moderate breeze. We're going to have sunny intervals with some rain. And let's see what the forecast is. Is that at 8 o'clock it was a sunny interval, and they were right on that one. And 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock we're going to have a cloud and rain. and certainly cloud. And it does look as if it's building a bit. So not the best of days out there. And the forecast for Saturday and Sunday was we were going to have bright sunshine, but that's gone. The only thing is that tomorrow is Saturday, is going to be at the 19 degrees, and that's 3 degrees warmer than today. And Sunday is going to be 20 degrees, and that's 4 degrees warmer than today. So we do have some things to look forward to. But rain is never very far away. And all next week, we are going to get showers and perhaps towards the end of the week, a downpour. So a typical English summer. Tomorrow is the 1st of June. June is busting out all over. Oh, yes, it sure is. Is what is supposed to be one of the hottest months of the year, and coming into summer is not going to be the precursor of a decent summer that we might well have expected. Sad, that. Sad. Now let's look at the papers, because you just heard Philip and I talking about Mr. Trump and the Times. Trump found guilty in hush money trial. And there's a picture of him looking very, very discombobulated on the front page. The guilty verdict in Donald Trump's hush money trial is featured prominently in several of Friday's front pages. The former US president has been convicted of fraud by a jury that found him guilty on 34 charges of falsifying business records. The paper says opinion polls have suggested a criminal conviction could put off some voters, but some political strategists doubt whether it will have any effect in the United States elections later this year. Well, there you go. I mean, they are very difficult elections to us, a different interpretation of democracy. Mirror, historic trial verdict. The ex-president faces jail after jury convicts him on all 34 counts over porn star hush money. Trump guilty, it simply says. Trump guilty is the Mirror's headline. The paper's entire front page is dedicated to the verdict, which it describes as historic. The Eye, guilty. Same headline. Speaking outside court, Trump called the verdict a disgrace and said the trial was rigged. It says the trial, but I'm sure it means the trial. It's a typo. The Eye reports, I'm a very innocent man, he told reporters. Does that mean that the trial was flawed, or he didn't pay the money to Dusty Storm? Was it Dusty Storm? It's difficult to say what he means. And he's a politician. So it's difficult to say what any of them mean. The Daily Star, which always gives us a little bit of a giggle, but even it stays with the Trump trial. Orange man baby is guilty on all counts. You've been tangoed, it says. And once again, a very unflattering picture of Trump. And I would assume that the lady in the Oval inset is Dusty. The Daily Star brands Trump an orange man baby, with the paper's main image showing the 77-year-old looking solemn in court. I'll say he looks solemn. Goodness gracious me. That's awful. Right, The Guardian, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly Clint Eastwood films ranked. Oh, that's a banner. That's not a headline at all. The Guardian, pressure on Starmer to end the purge of Labour left. And the Guardian, as usual, has avoided the Trump thing altogether. And we have Harry, and I'm going to put him up so you can look at him because he's a handsome sort of chap, just while I finish off the headlines. So forgive me, Harry, your public are able to watch you. The Guardian says Sir Keir Starmer is facing mounting pressure to end what his critics say is a purge of those on the Labour left. Accusations Sir Keir was conducting a cull of left-wingers came after several high-profile members were told they would not be selected to stand as Labour candidates. The paper reports Labour has denied blocking candidates from running. The paper also carries an interview with Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner, who describes herself as being a Marmite figure. Well, what they say about Marmite is you either love it or hate it, but you never forget it. Daily Express, exposed, splits in Labour ranks. The Express reports Sir Keir was yesterday challenged by Miss Rayner to allow veteran MP Diane Abbott to stand at the general election, exposing divisions among the party's senior ranks. While the Financial Times says voters brace for tax increase despite assurances from Labour and Tories. Well, that's the truth. The Metro, cold-blooded monster. A mother's verdict as teacher who knifed and buried partner is jailed. So it went on crime. The Daily Mail, world exclusive podcast says cancer patients to get tailored vaccines on the NHS. A sub-banner, Kate to miss rehearsal for Trooping the Colour. So, good morning, Harry Atherton.
Good morning, Keith. Good morning, everybody.
There are front pages for you this morning. 90% about Trump, but one or two about the Labour Party and the way it appears is accused of treating its very left-wing people.
Well, Trump, I guess, first thing, the progressives have just guaranteed his election because it's so transparent that it was a political attempt at legal assassination to thwart democracy. Whether you're a supporter of Trump or not, it's the way that was put together is scandalous, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen in any democratic country where you use the law as a weapon to destroy somebody politically. Yes. So I think many people who were against Trump, even within his own party, leading senators who were not Trump fans, have now switched loyalty to Trump because they're so outraged by this blatant attempt to destroy him through a puppet judge and a puppet court. So I think they've just guaranteed his election. It was pretty much on the right track anyway, because it's questionable whether Biden, or myself for that matter, may live until the election time. But anyway, as I say, they've just shot themselves in the foot. Yes. So that's the first point. The second point you raise is the one.
Just before we leave that, Harry, it is obviously it's a totally different system, and one of the things that I have read somewhere is that if the conviction stands, that he will be disqualified from running for president. Is that your understanding?
No, absolutely the opposite. He can, not only is he not disqualified, he could even go to jail and become president. Then the law. So anybody saying differently hasn't got a full understanding of North American law.
Right.
I lived in North America half of my life, and so I've got a certain familiarity with the system. But I think if you read the analyses of the situation from legal experts at the moment, the fact that he is found guilty, it makes good headlines, but it doesn't alter his potential to be the leader of the country, even if he goes to jail. Now, what he'll probably do is appeal, almost bound to appeal. And that appeal process will take it to a new jurisdiction, and the time will go by until after the election. So to a degree, it's a political storm in a teacup, which, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, has been very helpful towards him. But no, in answer to your question, it does not stop you becoming president, even if you're a convicted felon.
Right. Okay. Go on to your next point.
Next point, I think you were more closer to home, was the situation, I think, of the Labour Party, or Starmer in particular, positioning himself to avoid opposition from his own ranks. One could argue that if the election in Britain is a foregone conclusion and he's going to become prime minister and they're going to be left with a rump Conservative Party, then the main opposition to him will come from his own party, particularly from the left wing of that party. And so he's been parachuting some of the key players into some of the key constituencies, the ones that are his strongest supporters, the moderate element of the Labour Party, and trying to control the less moderate wing, left wing, extreme left wings, denying them candidacies, and in this particular case, putting a little bit of a block in front of Diane Abbott. What's the most interesting development, of course, is that the two key players, the Labour leader in Scotland, and Anwar, and his own deputy, Angela Rayner, have contradicted him. So we'll just see who's in charge of the Labour Party. Angela Rayner has come out in full support of Diane Abbott, and she's also said she's doing it in her capacity as deputy leader. Well, I mean, that's a direct confrontational posture, stand against her boss.
Yes.
So it would seem that even if she has narrowly escaped the scandal of making a financial killing on her council house sale, she has certainly shot herself in the foot there. And if Starmer is capable of taking strong leadership, which I doubt, mind you, but anyway, if he is, he's got to get rid of her. I mean, because otherwise she's going to be the tail wagging the dog.
Yes.
And, so the question is, does he get rid of her now? It's difficult for him to do right now because that would look very badly run up to an election. Or does he do it after the election, in which case she may remain deputy leader in name only, but she would not be given any formal role, any senior portfolio, for instance.
Yes.
So I think that's probably the likely solution. So she'll have a period in the wilderness within the framework of the party. She'll probably stay as deputy leader, but I think she's just guaranteed she won't get a formal job like minister of this or minister of that in the new Labour government.
Yes.
But it's a sign of the fact that there's still tremendous opposing views within the Labour Party. So it's unclear as to what sort of a policy that we're going to have to govern the country. Starmer has effectively, and I think he's done a good job here. He's done a good job in in isolating the Corbynista faction, the extreme left-wing faction. And he's taken 4 years to do that, but I think he's been very successful in doing it. But he's been doing it in little sneaky ways, behind the scenes, little changes. He doesn't come across as a strong leader. But however, he's achieved his goals, and God bless him for that.
Yes.
But
what bothers me, Harry, is that we have had a demonstration of what happens when the tail wags the dog, with the way that the backbenchers, the Tory backbenchers, were manipulating Theresa May. And if, in fact, we're going to have more of the same, we are in for a very, very rocky ride. And our international influence is bound to be affected.
Well, I don't know that Britain has got very much international influence anymore. We really don't count. I don't think Europe counts anymore. Europe is a spent force. It's a highly indebted, out-of-date philosophical force. And I think, as I've mentioned before, the center of the world now is somewhere in the middle of the South China Sea. And we Europeans are living a century behind the times. Europe doesn't count, and most certainly Britain doesn't count anymore. We've had our moment of glory, just like we've gone through the same process that empires have always gone through, whether it's been the Roman Empire or you name it in history. It's all very cyclical. And so we must accept our new status in the world. So I don't think anything we do in Britain now will change the international scene very much. And the most of the cards are in the hands of the I would say the Chinese and the rogue states. They're currently not in the hands of the Americans. The Americans seem to be a little bit lost right now. They don't know quite what to do. Biden has finally given authority for American weapons to be used fired from Ukraine at Russian internal targets, which is a step forward, I suppose, to standing up to this aggression. But no, going back to the main point, I don't see Britain as being any important force in the world. It could be a moral force, I suppose, but we've got so caught up in multiculturalism that we don't even know who we are. We've lost our national identity. There is no central British culture now to which immigrants are supposed to aspire to join. In fact, there seems to be an antipathy towards everything British, and where we should accept the customs of all of these millions of people coming into our country. So I think we're a spent force until we get that back on track. And one would think that would come from a patriotic front, more likely to be found on the right of the political spectrum than on the left. But of course, we've had a conservative government, which is not a right-wing government. It's at best, it's a social democratic. It's been a social democratic government ever since Maggie Thatcher was deposed. And to some degree, if you take the core element of the First Nation Tories, are literally a left-wing government. There's very little to distinguish between the current parliamentary Conservative Party and the Labour Party. They're pretty much the same kinds of people, and you get all this question of defections, of a recent defection, I forget what his name was, crossed the floor to become a socialist, calling for Palestine.
Everybody has forgotten what his name is, I think.
Yeah, calling for Palestine to be named as a state. Not a single word about the poor hostages, by the way. I mean, what a dishonest character he must be.
Yeah.
Whether you want Palestine to be a state in its own right is a debatable question. It's a very valid question. But if you're going to become a state, you need to assume the responsibilities, moral and legal responsibilities, and not a word about the hostages, many of whom have been killed, and many of them are still captive.
Yes, indeed.
Everybody seems to have forgotten them. But so these cross-party defections are such that it shows we're pretty much on the same wavelength. And what we need, I suppose, is a proper right-wing party, not extreme right-wing, but a party that reflects traditional values, hard work and decency and all the rest of it. And there is a party that's progressing ever so slowly, the Reform Party, but I don't know that its time has come yet. So I think we're a little bit like a ship without a rudder at the moment.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I don't think just a bit. I think that we are a ship without a rudder. And every opportunity for our leaders, and I say our leaders, not necessarily the right or the left, but those people who would aspire to tell us which way we should go, is very lacking. Is that they are not.
Well, it's taking the campaign trail to prompt people like Rishi Sunak to start to utter a few words of conservative thought, of conservative philosophy. Nothing against these guys. They're probably lovely guys, as I've said before. Great to go have a beer with and a bit of an intellectual chat, or even chat about the local soccer game. But no, they're not conservatives in any way, shape, or form. There's one or two of them conservative: Frost, Lord Frost, Rees-Mogg, Suella Braverman, and one or two others are conservative thinkers, and but very few of the others are. They're mostly middle of the road, is bordering, closet socialists, in
Yes.
my opinion.
Well, of course, in my opinion, I got upset almost a decade ago when they started to use what I called ratios to select candidates. Are you black? Yes. Are you conservative? How would I know? Oh, that's okay. You're black. We need a black person in that thing. We need a gay person, or we need somebody, but anybody who we're not going to ask them about their political philosophy. And the moment that you actually start down that particular road, then you've had it, because you will not get accord. You won't get people subscribing to the party line. It will be all sorts of well, they call it the me generation. Is me.
Indeed, you're right. It's a slippery slope once you start doing that by numbers. It's quite obvious that a society should be represented by all of its by all of its parts, and it's only fair that the voice of all of these minority groups should be heard. But they're not equal minority groups. There should be a common theme which transcends the color of your skin or your sexual persuasion and what have you. And the voice of these minorities should be heard, but it shouldn't necessarily be a mix of colors that decide the mainstream policy.
Of course.
Otherwise, the artist in front of his canvas ends up with all sorts of strange colors if you mix them all into one. And so where have the colors that you truly want to put together on the same canvas to make a beautiful picture of whatever? They've lost their distinction. They've just blended into some awful color. And in fact, if I remember my childhood arts classes, isn't white the absence of all color and black the presence of all color? You eventually just with a black canvas, I suppose, if you mix all the colors together. No, you can't do it by numbers. You've got to try and represent your constituents and certainly their values. But no, it's you can't say, well, we have to have 10 black MPs and 10 homosexual MPs and 10 what have you. No, can't do it by numbers.
It's crazy. Politics isn't. Let's not use the word politics. Governance isn't about that.
Yeah.
Governance is about having the skill to lead a country through a very hazardous series of waters, and that's not been happening.
Well, to lead anybody, you need people with the qualities to analyze, to evaluate, to come to a conclusion, to make the right decisions. So you can't categorize that in any way. And going back to something I said just a couple of moments ago, I mean, what's this question about being black or homosexual? I never noticed that before. I thought we got over that 50, 60 years ago. It's only that it's recently come back to the forefront of political and social thinking. I was totally unaware of the color of a person's skin until organizations like Black Lives Matter started to ram it down our throats again.
Yes.
Then you begin to notice. I hadn't noticed that difference. I see a person through his qualities, first of all, not through the color of his skin or his sexual persuasion.
Harry, can I just tell you just a little red herring, because I'm famous for my red herrings. But I was in the middle of Nigeria and traveling to a town called Damaturu, which is in the northeast of the country. And we called into a petrol station to get some milk and some bananas and some petrol. And hundreds of little black, mostly boys, swamped around the car, particularly when the word went out there was a white man in it, because they didn't see too many there. And they were lovely. They had perfect skin and white teeth and so on. But one little chap daringly put his hand through the window and went on my hand to see whether the white would rub off.
Well, that is a touching story, but in many ways it's a sad story. I think we need to internationalize society to a greater degree, and then that they would be fascinated by that, and hopefully one day that young men doing that will have a PhD in nuclear physics. I mean,
but actually, you know, it is my opinion, having travelled to several African countries, that we actually get far more concerned about these things than they do. There's an issue in Lewis where one of the bonfire societies dressed up as Zulus. Each bonfire society has a theme. They dressed up as Zulus, and therefore they blacked up. And the pressure and the nonsense and all this is dreadful and so on. So we'll force them to find alternatives. And I related this to some of my Nigerian friends, and they actually looked at me in disbelief. They couldn't believe that thinking of that sort could take place in what they still consider to be a fairly mature democracy. And we get excited about it, and I think it's manufactured by those people who are looking for a cause or want to cause trouble, rather than the reality of the world. I simply think that race and color is something that we are far more concerned about in this country, and perhaps Europe, I don't know, than the actual countries where color is prevalent.
Absolutely, and I thought it had all been put together years ago, but it's been resurrected for political gain, I suppose. And you're quite right, and largely by groups and organizations in the Western world, in the European world, who are seeking to be holier than thou, and all this nonsense about compensation for something that happened 300 years ago. Why not compensation for something that happened 3,000 years ago, or
Yes.
10,000 years? I mean, it's also very silly, but people see political hay to be made out of it, and they and that's what the chosen path. Their argument is seeking a better position for themselves. Everybody climbs on a bandwagon, whether it's a religion, whether it's nationhood, whether it's climate change. They all seem to have to belong to something, and they become ideologically committed to a degree that they no longer think clearly.
Yes. Well, is the issue of Northern Ireland and whether soldiers were, guilty of murder or breaking the law or whatever is. I mean, I spent 15 years in Northern Ireland, right throughout the Troubles, and it is, first of all, the issues don't reflect what actually happened. Yes, of course, naughty things happened on both sides, but it didn't reflect what I experienced there. But also is we are trying to make an assessment of guilt based on the mores of today, 2024, and what happened in 1975. How can we possibly do that? Mores do change, criminality changes, all sorts of things change. But there is a group of people who insist upon going back and making a judgment that is 50 years out of date.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can't judge situations totally out of context, and I think the Irish situation is a particularly interesting one, and one where I can fully understand the will of the Irish people to be free of British rule. Ever since the Battle of the Boyne in 1690, they've felt persecuted, and probably with good reason. And to want to be masters of their own destiny, and they've never lost that thought. So one can fully understand that, and then you get into the question of Northern Ireland, which where it became a military confrontation, and in wars of any kind, in the wars in Israel that are going on right now, you're getting probably atrocities, and atrocities committed by ordinary, decent people. War is like that. I mean, the sheer thought of leaving your job in some comfortable environment, whether you're a bus driver or a bank manager, and having to point a gun at somebody and shoot them and take away their life is alien to decent human behavior. But you've collectively taught to do that in the army, so killing in that context becomes not easy, but ingrained into the nature of what you're doing, and will lead to excesses. I mean, the bombing of Nazi Germany, where we would take out 100,000 people, men, women, children, dogs, cats, and pigs in one night, in Hamburg or Dresden, or wherever. That's the horror of war. But it's the nature of war, and it's the nature of how people start wars. So the people who start them are essentially the ones who should be called to reckoning.
Yes, indeed.
And we can look at that. Who started the war in Ukraine? The Russians. Who started the war and what's going on in Gaza? The incursion by the terrorist group Hamas across the border, slaughtering and beheading children, burning them in front of their mothers, and that sort of thing. Somebody has to be responsible, and if a nation then reacts to this sort of extremism, they're bound almost to fall into the same trap, and then suddenly the Western world is up in arms if number of civilians are killed. Terrible, of course it is, but that's war.
Yes. Harry, switching to war, how do you view, and how do the French view Vladimir Putin?
Well, the French love a strong leader. They're they're an undisciplined lot. The French, they're freedom loving. They rise up and cut off their kings' heads from time to time, and so they need a strong man to keep them under control, and they'll admire a strong man. So there's a certain level of admiration for Putin because he seems to know where he's going and what he wants to do. Though there is acceptance that he is the aggressor in this particular case, and there's beginning to be a realization that if he succeeds in Ukraine, he'll be at our door in a very short order because NATO is a myth. The idea that NATO would defend Europe is absolute nonsense. There's no such agreement. Standing together collectively is nonsense. The actual NATO charter says that if one of the members is attacked, the others can go to that his help if the conditions allow. The actual clause 5 of the NATO agreement does not commit countries to collectively defending a united Europe. It's nonsense. And NATO couldn't. Their militaries, most of their militaries, are so run down. They've got about enough shells and bullets to last 10 days. I mean, so if Putin's put his country onto a war footing and the factors are churning out weaponry, which they are right now, and is building up into a war situation, he could walk through Europe like a hot knife through butter. And so I think there's beginning of a reaction. The Macron has toughened up a little bit on Russia. He's talked about putting French boots on the ground in Ukraine. Initially in a training capacity, but eventually in a fighting capacity. And the countries that are immediately bordering Russia, Lithuania, Poland, and the rest of them, they're building up their military forces and a proportion of their budget that they spent on defense. Though rogue countries like Hungary, I think, would probably just throw in their lot with the Russians. So NATO is a myth, and the Americans have got fed up of paying for it, so they won't. With Trump about to be elected, unless his philosophy is help yourselves before I help you, and since they're not doing anything of that, Britain, of course, Britain couldn't field an army. It would have a tough time fielding one single division. I mean, never mind an army. I mean, it couldn't. Yeah. Britain couldn't defend itself.
No, absolutely. Your assessment there is quite right. Your comments about commitment too is that there were, for instance, United Nations soldiers who stood around and watched slaughter in places like Bosnia during the Bosnia War.
Absolutely, and wouldn't have, had they tried to put an end to it, which they could have done quite easily, they would have been out of a job, or they would have been considered the guilty ones. Because how do you put an end to renegades who are slaughtering people? You shoot them, you kill them.
Yeah,
and they weren't authorized to do that. So is the Western world are we prepared to go to war anymore? All Putin does has to rattle his nuclear sword in the scabbard, and everybody gets frightened stiff. Well, If we're a nuclear power, we should we should explode a couple of bombs or something. I don't know. Does that make me extreme right wing? Makes me a poker player.
Makes you a realist.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't like hearing reality, to be quite honest with you. And that's why I think there is an antipathy to sort of national news in our present newspapers, which are nowhere near as strong as they were in the halcyon days of Fleet Street. They don't call it like it is. As I made the comment a moment ago when I was going through the papers, the front pages. Everybody, well, not everybody, but there are a lot of people that think that the Guardian is absolutely wonderful because it seems to be somewhat pacifist and liberal and so on and so forth. But it has totally ignored on its front page this morning the Trump guilty verdict. It's talked about something else, which is got very little attention. So our awareness factor has dipped considerably as well.
Well, speaking from the authority as being former Northeast rugby correspondent for the Guardian, myself, I think it's a frightful newspaper. It clearly takes what it believes to be a moral stance in this world, and has lost the sense of its role in terms of a free press of delivering news to the people.
Yes.
It filters news. It provides it selectively, as you say. Some stories it covers, some it doesn't cover at all, and then if it does it with a certain bias. You may say many of the papers have taken political stances. If you go back to the great newspaper owners, the Northcliffes and the others, they all obviously had their clientele, but they really realized that their fortunes lay in the fact of being all things to all people. And they had a role, and they self-policed themselves. We've now got everything from Ofcom to different bodies where if articles appear that contradict certain values that have been set up by committees, then those newspapers can be fined, or stations can lose their licenses. So have we got a free press anymore? I doubt it.
No.
I don't think the press is particularly free. We
are as free and independent as any I know. The only thing is that we're not delivering news to millions, unfortunately. But I often think, Harry, that one day you're a tiny little backwater, and the next day, for some reason, you become an international power. So who knows?
Yeah.
The Harry Atherton archives may well become forces.
Well, that's let me balance my journalistic pedigree by saying that I was also a correspondent for the Daily Telegraph. So I've written for both sides of the political spectrum.
Actually, another little red herring along the way is, as you know, I worked for Reuters for a decade, and in their famous Fleet Street headquarters, I think it was on the 4th or 5th floor, there was a photograph, or a series of photographs of Ian Fleming, Edgar Wallace, Frederick Forsyth, and the other famous 19th century, 20th century journalist whose name has escaped me, and it shouldn't because he's the most famous of the lot. But anyway, the reason they were grouped together was they were all famous novelists, they were all worked for Reuters, and they were all spies.
Right, yes. Jean Le Carré, no, not Jean Le Carré, no.
No, Le Carré wasn't one of them. It was a bit before that time. I mean, it's just silly because he lived not very far from here in a place called Bateman's. His home was called Bateman's. It'll come back to me. It'll pop into my mind, and if I suddenly scream out,
Bateman's was Kipling, wasn't it?
yes, that's right, Rudyard Kipling.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. It was Kipling. He was also a Reuters correspondent as well as being a spy.
Well, I think journalism historically has very often been a cover for either politics or spying, hasn't it?
It has indeed. In fact, one of the big disappointments of my life is that I worked for Reuters. That I was a member of the Travelers Club, which is considered to be the spies club, and is open to offers. And the only people that ever approached me were the South Africans prior to apartheid disappearing. I think I talk too much to be a good spy.
Yeah, I think the closest I ever got to it was I remember I was approached when the Shah of Persia was displaced and the religious regime came in Iran, and they eventually went to war with Iraq, the Iran-Iraq war, and they needed airplanes. They needed Hercules transporter aircraft. And by that time, I was in the airline business, and I actually was approached by a secretive group in Montreal, asking if I could source half a dozen Hercules transport aircraft. just approached at a party because I was in the airline business. I should know that, and so I ordered another beer and digested all of that. But it's amazing how it happens, you know. I mean, where the hell was I going to get, you know, half a dozen Hercules aircraft from? But I was seen as being a potential, you know, opening for them to do that. So it's amazing how it all goes on.
Yes, it is. And I suppose really by probing like that is that eventually they find somebody who pops up and says, "Oh yes, I was talking to somebody the other day who's got a couple of Hercules parked in."
Absolutely. Oh, there was amazing financial offer attached to it, you know, and this I wouldn't have to work again in my life.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. The amounts are huge.
And probably because I'd be bumped off, I wouldn't have much of a life afterwards.
No.
But I was approached. It wasn't an embassy party, but it was a sort of a big social gathering in Montreal. I was approached there to get into the game. So it's a strange world.
Yes. Yes. And it is amazing as I would say that even though I've been a sort of senior journalist, I'm a sort of fairly ordinary sort of chap, and that it's ordinary sort of chaps that get sucked into these situations.
Well, it could be very tempting. I mean, if big money is involved, or if they can strike a responsive chord in terms of what your beliefs are, and that you want to support one cause or another, they can harness people in, and people are naive. It gives them a sense of importance, of power. And yes, I can quite see how spies are recruited. And certainly, if you go back to the famous spy stories that you and I have lived through, the young socialist spies who were recruited by the Russians in the 1930s and 40s, the Philbys and these young people, university, ideological beliefs, as they probably most people do have at that age. The famous quote by who was it? Was it Churchill, I think, who said, "If you weren't a socialist at 20, there was something wrong with your heart. If you weren't a conservative at 30, there was something wrong with your head." So young people were quickly subverted into becoming lifelong spies and following an ideological course that eventually became headline news. But that's the way the spy game is played.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
The strange thing is, of course, is that the people who were likely to be suborned by the whole idea of being socially clean and pure were the sort of people that would go into the Foreign Office.
Well, this is it, and people espouse beliefs. But we talked about ideologies, religions. It's control of people's minds. People are essentially weak and can easily be subverted. Yeah, you're quite right. People are sometimes convinced of what to do by their wives. I've heard.
Yes.
and vice versa, I might point out. Yeah. Now we're all influenceable.
Indeed, I had a very good insight into that sort of spy game in sorry, Harry, I'm just sending an invitation to Mark Maybe, and who
to connect with him or to come into the studio. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a very simple way of doing it now. This system that we use, StreamYard, is an incredible system. It does really replicate a television. What's the word? The
connections with
the operational side of a television studio, and then it recognizes that nowadays you can do things which you couldn't do with the old television system, such as pull people in on the internet and so on. So it's got that added function. And it is so simple to do it now. Even I can do it, and I've never been very good technically.
No, me neither.
Media, so we must be very grateful that we're able to do programs like this so simply.
So you've got Mark coming on now, have you? Or?
Well, it's hopefully, but you talk about the influence of his wife. Of wives is as I said to Philip, who will probably come on if Mark isn't coming on. Is I said to Philip, I gave everybody Monday off because it was a public holiday. And Mark immediately listened to his wife, who said, "Take the week off, dear, and I'll take you away."
We've lost him.
Yeah,
where's he gone? Anywhere interesting?
No, I don't know. He said that she was taking him to somewhere rather nice. So in my mind, I decided that he was going to get to one of these spa hotels, where they pamper you and they put you in a sauna at 10 o'clock in the morning, and at 11 o'clock they're feeding you cocktails.
Okay, sounds good to me. But anyway, I should be leaving you shortly, shouldn't I?
Well, hang on for a little while, because I describe Friday now as the Friday Jamboree.
Mm-hmm.
And if Mark comes on at 10, Melissa will come on at 10:30. I mean, sometimes things happen by accident, and the fact of the matter is that you and Melissa and Mark and Philip, and with a little bit of help from your friend here, is become very, very powerful in terms of what you talk about and the opinions that you give. So the Friday Jamboree has turned into something that is not only familiar and favorite with us, but also with our viewership. People are now talking about the Friday Jamboree.
Well, we bounce ideas off each other, and of course, and it's to be hoped that we all have opposing in a nice sense, not conflictual, but opposing points of view, different points of view, and we share ideas, and it triggers new thoughts on because none of us has a propriety rights on any given philosophy.
I will be very interested to hear what Melissa's view is on Trump. But is in many ways her attitude as an American, right in the heart of New York, and in the heart of the investment industry, and so on and so forth. A former journalist, is she does tend to be a bit ho hum. It is all floating around, and there's not a hell of a lot we can do about it. And it will be interesting to see what her reaction is to the Trump situation.
Well, one of the difficulties that we have, being of journalistic background, the two of us, is we have a neutral role to play. I remember when I began as a young reporter, my editor said that my role is to hold up a mirror and to write about what I saw in the mirror. That I had no opinions of my own. It had to be completely neutral. And I took that to heart, and that's how I tried to perform for many years in that role. Inevitably, we do develop ideas and beliefs, standards ourselves, and they begin to influence us. I think we become less useful as intermediaries between news happenings and the general public when that moment arrives. Now, it doesn't stop us either expressing in writing or verbally points of view that have developed because of the composite influence of all of the things that we've seen and done, which is a privileged world to be in the journalism field, because we have a peep show into everybody's life, into all sorts of situations that very few people have. And so we have an inordinate amount of experience from which to draw conclusions, which, as I say, puts us in a fairly privileged position. And if we can analyze them well and we don't become too doctrinaire ourselves, I think we can be useful in that context. But we've lost at that point our usefulness as newspaper reporters, because we're seeing things with the bias of our own personal experience. Now, Melissa, in the few times that I've talked to her, I was interested to try to guess where she was coming from. New Yorker. New York is traditionally a Democratic hotbed. But no, I think Melissa probably has some fairly fixed views on what's right and what's wrong. She's a bright kid, and it wouldn't surprise me if she's very philosophical about Trump. And question is, you don't have to like these guys. You just have to think, are they taking the nation in the right direction?
Yeah.
And since Biden was taking the nation in no direction whatsoever, a little bit beholden to the Green Party movement, the the left-wing movement, which is all very well, all very noble, but you've got to get the money from somewhere to apply all of these policies. I think the time for a strong leader is now, and Trump will come in. He'll make some mistakes, but he should, in theory, take America down a more definite path that it needs to go through in the future. Because if it displays weakness, it will only encourage encroachment, both material and ideological, on the part of the aggressors. And we know who they are: China, North Korea, Iran, and whoever else and Russia, of course, throwing their hat into the ring. And they just play on other people's weaknesses. So we need a strong leader in the States, and Trump is going to be a strong leader. He's not going to be right all of the time, and he's quite a detestable person as a human, but could be good for the States.
Yes, I tend to agree with you. Not too many people nowadays are prepared to put up with somebody they don't like. It's become a Hollywood type occupation, being president of a country.
Well, Thatcher was not liked, and she said it herself. She said, "I'm not here to be liked."
Yeah,
and she wasn't liked. I don't think she was liked throughout her tenure, but she was respected. Reagan managed to walk the fine line. He was respected, and he is actually quite liked. He became almost an avuncular figure.
Yes, that's right. And in retrospect, is now considered to be one of the better presidents that the United States had, even though at the time there was a little bit of the intellectuals were this comical figure.
Yeah, this is true. And one of the problems sometimes is simple thinkers. I don't mean simple-minded people, but people who think in simple terms are much better leaders than the ones who so intellectually caught up in every philosophy under the sun that they can never make a decision. And they wanted to be all things to all people, and they end up being neither fish nor fowl.
No.
So very often, a leader needs not to have a simplistic vision, but a clear vision, and communicate that policy, those ideas to people who will support him, who will support that particular line of thinking. Oh, well, look at who we've got here.
Colonel Chinstrap is back.
I don't mind if I do. How are you, Harry?
I'm very fine. We were talking about you relaxing in a sauna or something in some exotic place. I don't know quite where.
No. It was our wedding anniversary in the week.
Oh, okay.
And I took Jackie to her dream restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
I left a pauper, as you can imagine, but all the boxes were ticked.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah, 36 years. Good God.
My goodness, that's wonderful. Wonderful. 36 years.
Yes, and who knows? We may even get to Ruby level. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But if we get to the Ruby, I'll have to take her for a curry.
Yeah. Well,
Ruby Murray.
Yeah, my goodness, yes. Well, I've been married for 64 years.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's diamond plus.
Hang on. No, let's get this right now. 65 years. But it involved two ladies. One for 20 years, and the other, and the second one for 44 years.
Yes, the first dear lady you once said you loved very much but didn't really like.
Mm-hmm, yes.
And no doubt the current Mrs. Atherton, Madame Atherton, both those boxes are ticked, I hope.
Oh yes, indeed. I was married the first 20 years to a wonderful woman, and absolutely adored her, still do, but not a very nice person. So I'm very fortunate, really, to have met in my life two people.
Yes, well, I'm hoping, even though
The
it's
first one
down.
had the good wit. The first one was wise enough to ditch me. I didn't ditch her. She got rid of me. So I did, and I did have 3 years as a bachelor in between.
Yes, and I didn't know your first wife, Harry. Of course, Kathy, wasn't it?
Kathleen, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well,
So-
Harry, although contact with you is currently only down an online streaming channel, I'm hoping some of your good luck and longevity rubs off on me.
Oh,
We'll
good.
have to see.
Well, you look like you're a happy man and in good shape, and
Appearances can be deceptive, Harry.
when you have the great fortune to live in one of the world's most wonderful cities. Well, both of you. One of you lives in Lewis, and the other one lives in Arundel. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
I can't imagine two places that I would, rather live, except where I am now. I'm very happy, but gosh, I love Lewis and Arundel. Gorgeous, beautiful town. Yeah.
Yes, it is. We just had the 2-day Corpus Christi festival, which involves the Roman Catholic Cathedral. All the congregation up there, they lay down what's called the carpet of flowers. So in the middle aisle of the cathedral, which is a magnificent building, really beautiful building, that whole central aisle is carpeted in flowers.
Oh gosh.
Petals.
Yeah.
In a particular pattern each year. Yeah. Religious, but very beautiful. And our parish church, St. Nick's, which is just across the road, they do the cafe. So they have what's called a pop-up cafe, which my wife Jackie and her friend Kate help at and thoroughly enjoy. And everything is contributed to by the congregationers. So all the pastries and cakes they sell, all done by the congregationers. So all of the takings go to the parish church. And they average about £600 a day.
My goodness.
I know. It's
incredible.
incredible.
So it's a great town. I said, I'd love to live there. And I have some time ago, I picked out a property that I would love to have. Though I'm not sure whether the Duke of Norfolk would want to sell it at the moment.
Well, it's a bit big.
It's a bit big, but the heating bills would be quite high. But I loved it anyway. It suited me down to the ground.
Well, should you ever come to Arundel, then go to the castle. It's not that expensive. It's not just the building; it's the grounds. There's
I've been through it. And
you have.
I've been through it, which is why I thought I could quite easily live there if circumstances permitted. But bearing in mind that the Howard family owns 30 castles in Britain.
I know.
Not the least of which is Castle Howard, near where I was born.
Yes. No, the FitzAlan Howards for centuries have been major landowners. It's quite obscene, really. In fact, my youngest current girlfriend, Oliver's my youngest, Keith's met him online. His girlfriend, Phoebe, who is an absolute delight, and she's so left-wing, it just makes you smile. So she's young and left-wing. Well, my wife took Ollie and Phoebe round the castle, and Phoebe, although she enjoyed it visually, was absolutely spitting feathers at the sheer obscenity of the wealth and land owned by this minority. No, the Labour Party needs people like Phoebe. Sadly, it's purging them, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So your reflections on the Trump convictions, Harry?
Well, we talked about that earlier, and I was saying to Keith that I believe that the progressive onslaught on Trump has just guaranteed his election.
Oh, you
And
do take that view, do you?
I do, in fact. Under U.S. law, being a convicted felon does not stop you from becoming president. In fact,
No, I know that. I
you
mentioned
can be
that to
sent to
Keith
prison.
earlier.
You can even be sent to prison and run the country from your prison cell if you wanted to.
Yes, well, he's not going to be in prison for this lot. And of course, he will appeal.
And that'll take us beyond the election, I would think, wouldn't it? The
Oh,
appeal.
hugely, yeah. But there are, as you say, there are the other far more serious trials. I mean, I was reading out to Keith earlier when I was with him early doors some statistics that I read on the Beeb. Quite a high percentage of Trump voters on what we would call a Murray poll did say that if he was convicted even just of this, they would have second thoughts about voting for him. And the percentage amongst non-partisan voters, if you like, was even higher. So I'm wondering whether it might, what you say might provoke a civil war. The far rights, the Proud Boys and the usual suspects are all Xing and Twittering and whatever about time to act and civil war and assault the courts and staff, and so it could get quite nasty.
I take that with a pinch of salt, Philip, because there is an extreme element to amongst the Trump supporters, but the main Trump support comes from what we call the old Rust Belt.
Yes.
That part of America that was dispossessed by the change in economic change that hit the States after the golden years of post-World War II, and the influx of foreign goods, all sorts of new technologies, the emergence of Silicon Valley, and a whole section of Middle America was left out. They, I think, are the bed of Trumpism, the actual source of Trumpism. They're extremists because the extremists. I mean, you get extremists on both sides, of course.
Yes.
And of course, a left-wing press, which we generally have in the world now. There are very few clearly right-wing news outlets. There are some, but they stand out so much that they're seen as being a little bit oddball. So the average media, whether it's the Washington Post or the Los Angeles Times or the New York Times, they're pretty much very left-wing, I would think. And so they would highlight all of the activities of this fringe mob of the Trump supporters far beyond the level of their influence. Certainly, Trump appeals to them, but I think Trump's basic support is middle class, Rust Belt, dispossessed people who are prepared to work hard and are fed up of everybody living off the state. So it's got a message, and I think that message will eventually reverberate in Britain after a period of socialist rule, when things get even worse, and then we will start to get a proper conservative government. It won't be the Conservative Party that reform or somebody that takes his place, but that's a separate subject. But back to Trump. No, I think he's got a lot of middle class support, and a lot of them hold their noses because they don't like Trump. I don't like Trump, but I think he would be a good thing for America right now. It needs to be put back on track. I mean, Biden is a senile old fool. I mean, he's I just cannot see. I'm surprised that somebody is more worthy hasn't thrown their hat in the ring. But knowing American politics, you've got to get the support of the party. And I think Trump will be a good thing for America.
You know, Harry, you really shouldn't refer to Keith as a senile old fool. Well, not all of those words apply.
You
Anyway.
talk about throwing his hat in the ring, are you?
Well, it's a big hat. Why not?
Mm.
Why not? Did I tell you my true legal story about a judge now retired at Lewis Crown Court who, having sentenced a chap, the defendant gave him an absolute barrage of abuse, which involved dirty, fat, and female genitalia.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it got round very quickly around all the bar and the security people what had been said, because this judge was very pompous, very, very old school, and he took this to heart. Anyway, he was leaving the court, and he said to one of the old security officers, "Did you hear what that man called me?" And the security man, I kid you not, just said, "Yes, Your Honour, we heard. But don't worry, you're not fat." That's true.
Yeah.
That's a true story, Harry.
Yeah. Mm. Anyway, but I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to see how Britain regards Trump. How does Britain? I've been gone for so long from Britain that I'm not a good judge anymore. But how does Britain view its politicians? They didn't like Maggie, but they respected her.
Well, that's the point. You've always made the point that we don't have to like these people.
Mm-hmm.
It's the job they do or don't do that earns them the respect or not. I don't think Trump is respected by the British population. In fact, when he came over, although this was some years ago, to play golf on his golf course up in Scotland, there were really very large demonstrations against him. And it led him to comment about them. So they left their mark. But he has to have a skin like a rhino to do what he has done and is still doing. He must have. But of course, the youngsters, the young people of Britain really do not like him. They think he's a thug, basically. But the reality is, you may agree that if he gets back in, then Britain will have to deal with him. I mean, do business with him.
Yeah. Well, I wonder which world leader the British would look up to. Can you think of a major world leader?
Good morning.
There you go.
Good day's golf.
Oh, fantastic.
Um,
I'll let you get back to it.
All right. The chief of staff is back.
Can I think about that? Because I know people here in Arundel who actually admire and respect Putin. One in particular thinks Putin is the dog's undercarriage. World leaders, you've got me.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, we in Europe, if we point to anybody in Germany, Spain, Italy, perhaps a little bit. I'm not sure. There's a sort of respect for Maloney, but Sanchez in Spain, Schulz in Germany, Macron is seen as a little bit of a crown by the British, I think. Seen as being very French. If we go abroad, Trudeau.
Well, he is.
Trudeau in Canada is considered a lightweight, a joke. Biden is considered to be dead, just simply a little electric motor in his back, keeping him walking around. Mind you, the same applies to me.
Well, it certainly applies to Keith, but his
Yeah.
battery is
And
between his legs.
in
In the sense that it's a mobility scooter that's coloured red.
yeah. And we get into some of the other big countries, Modi in India, and then China. Well, I guess probably people worldwide don't like but respect the Chinese leader.
Yes, I do.
And
I
he
do.
certainly knows in which direction is taking the country. It's rather sad, really, because I think China was emerging as evolving from a totalitarian state, which was necessary to keep things together in such a populous country with so many different languages. People talk about Chinese. There are 300 languages in China. The three main languages: the Sichuan, the Cantonese, and the Mandarin, of course. But such a widely spread thing, it needed a totalitarian government to put it back in shape. But it began to liberalize under was it Deng, and had a chance there. And I think the present leadership has retrogressed and turned it back into a totalitarian police state, and very much of a directed economy, and it's making the mistakes that that were made in Russia in the 30s, collective farming and all that sort of thing. Got the nation on a war footing, obviously, not just because of Taiwan, but because of international ambition. So I think China's moment of truly becoming great as a beacon of hope for the future of the world was torpedoed by that return to totalitarianism built on the one-child policy, which is leaving India now the chance to become the supreme nation on the planet, both in terms of the standard of education, quality of societal development, a little bit of totalitarianism on the part of Modi, but nonetheless, I think the great opportunity and a role that is being relinquished by America, by the United States, which ever since the 1930s, the Monroe Doctrine has been given over to isolationism because it's such a self-contained unit. It doesn't need anything. It's got every resource it needs. It doesn't even need to trade with the rest of the world. It can just close its borders and become a very successful enterprise, whereas many of the other countries have a lot of this and very little of that, and so they have to deal internationally to keep alive. So American isolationism, Chinese.
Yeah, but hang on, Harry. American isolationism didn't work, did it? I mean, it actually triggered the 1930s and economic collapse.
Well, it did and it didn't. Remember that it took many forms. The initial enunciation of isolationism by Monroe, I'm not sure, 1832, 34, somewhere like that, reached its climax, first climax, during the Civil War. The South always thought that at least Britain would come in on the side of the South because of the problem with cotton supplies to fuel the emerging industrial revolution in the cotton mills in Manchester and wherever. But they didn't. Britain surreptitiously supplied weaponry. A couple of battleships, the Alabama, for instance, was delivered after hostilities were started. And of course, Britain was fined £20,000 in the World Court afterwards for having supplied a belligerent in time of warfare. But there was a glut of cotton in Lancashire, so Britain didn't go in on the side of the South, and so it did remain isolationism prevailed in the Second World War. Next big state of affairs was the peaking, or the transformation, I should say, not the peaking, the transformation the US from an agricultural economy into an industrial economy, which was epitomized by the great industrial exhibition in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in 1886. That's how quickly they transitioned into being an industrial nation, and then into being a service nation, where the largest part of the economy was generated by the service industry, not by manufacturing, by 1922. The first country on earth to actually develop into a service economy, a post-industrial economy. And so if we take that period between 1886 and 1922, we've got the First World War. And when Wilson campaigned to become president I think he already was president for a second term in 1916, he campaigned on keeping America out of the European war. Didn't stop him 1 year later sending Black Jack Pershing in with the American Expeditionary Force in 1917, which turned the tide of the First World War. But he campaigned on isolationism. And then we move on now to the Second World War, where isolationism was predominant. America Firsters, led by people like Charles Lindbergh, desperately fought to keep America out of the European war. And Churchill had won over Roosevelt, but Roosevelt was having to bend over backwards to help him best he could. Lend-Lease destroyers, the Placentia Bay Agreement, Prince of Wales, and all the rest of it. And it wasn't until the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and even then, America did not declare war on Germany. Germany declared war on America in support of Japan.
Yes.
And so that forced now Roosevelt was delighted, because he did see switching to a war economy, putting everybody back to work, was a means of getting out of the Depression. And the Second World War did pull America out of its 1930s Depression period. So it was a very valuable exercise for America. And when it came out of it in 1945, it represented 50% of the world's economy. So I do believe that they became more internationally minded at that point. But however, isolationism has been a central thread to American thinking ever since the settlers went to the States. I think essentially the opening up of the West, the whole American dream was built on doing something American, on being different from Europe, of all of these different nationalities coming into an emerging country and starting a new life and never looking back. So I think it's in the lifeblood of Americans, isolationism. And they're not internationally minded. They make particularly bad international diplomats. They're very clumsy in the way they deal with other countries. Haven't got that mind. The French, the British have traditionally been internationalists. They had to be, because they sought their wealth and future by establishing world empires, colonies, and exploring the world. We're in a time when the British Empire, 3/4 of the world map was painted pink. And when we were at school, Keith.
Absolutely.
And in our lifetimes. And
what, in 1890?
We're devoted to that. So we're more internationally minded. We're not insular. We're not insular as an island. We live on an island, but we're far from being an insular type of thinking nation. And I think this is the difference. So I do believe that India is the future. It will trump China, and America will slowly fade away. And we're seeing evidence of that now with the run on the gold is going up. There's a tremendous run on the US dollar. I think America will once again retire within its borders. And if Trump is elected, he is an isolationist. He does not want to be involved in NATO. He doesn't want to be involved in the European mess. He does not. He doesn't want to be involved in Ukraine. he'll do a deal with China and trade with India. No, he's an isolationist at heart, I think. And so we're looking for a period of, we won't live long enough to see it, but I think a world dominated probably by, certainly by Asia and by India in particular. If India and China can avoid a war, that's where the future of the world will be.
Yes, well, something's telling me, although it wasn't a period of history, British history I studied, but was it not Gladstone who he adopted a splendid isolation policy?
Mm-hmm.
Was it Gladstone, Harry?
Yes, Gladstone, yes, was an isolation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, how long did that last? I don't think it lasted very long, did it?
Well, it was because he was anti-empire. He was somebody who did not believe, perhaps ahead of his time. He was an anti-colonialist, and so this is why he thought that Britain should just look after its own affairs and not be trying to run the rest of the world. One of the interesting reasons why he thought that way is because he thought that it was costing Britain too much. He thought the empire was an actual drain on Britain's finances. So all of this nonsense that Britain exploited its empire and made lots of money and became rich and everything, it became a world power with the world's biggest navy, and as we've said there, 3/4 of the world painted pink on the world atlas. But at what expense? The money that was coming out of India was essentially paying for the British army.
Yes.
And Britain would have been probably just as wealthy, and some of the smaller countries that just built within their own borders became extremely wealthy with a high standard of living. And we're living in an age when, let's say, if the British Empire peaked at the Great Jubilee of 1898 and started definite decline with Victoria's death in 1901, we've got to look at a period from 1904 when Argentina became the world's richest economy.
Good God.
And in terms of, personal living standards, individual, how much wealth per person was generated. And there are several ways you can measure the wealth of an economy, what its natural resources are. But if the natural resources only go into the pockets of a few, doesn't necessarily make the nation rich. But in terms of the quality of living standards of the BNP per head in Argentina, and was the world's number one. And it may soon be again with this guy Millet taking it back into that sort of a economic structure, and the rest of the world getting itself so much in debt and with silly values and social programs and paying people not to work. And Britain has now slipped to, I think, number 36 on that scale.
I'm sure that's right.
In many ways, we segued into this discussion on the basis of talking about world leaders. Who would you actually see, if any, a world candidate to be a world leader strutting the international stage? Anybody?
Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage has already got the Americans eating out of his hand. Nigel Farage, if the British would wake up, is the kind of leader they want, a clear speaking leader, a clear policy, a clear idea of where to take the nation.
Now, we've discussed this before, Harry, but you asked how...
The judge Farage, and do we like him? I don't kind of like the guy.
I know.
It's not a question of liking the guy. We didn't like Maggie Thatcher, but Maggie Thatcher was the greatest prime minister since Churchill, I guess.
Yeah.
And
But that's the electorate in Britain at the moment. It's been led down that way by a whole string of non-entities as leaders. Do you think that Farage can overcome that?
I'm sure he can. He is a natural born leader and a clear speaker. And given the opportunity to run the country, within 2 years, people would realize that they've done the right thing if they allow him to run the country with all of these quangos. And can you imagine the Bank of England and the Office of Budget Responsibility? These are the people who are running the country, and they've been given inordinate amounts of power that they can't and they shouldn't have. The power should be in the hands of the elected representatives. We, the people, should be the power, but we can't. The civil service, 600,000 of them. How many thousands of them on £100,000 a year and other ridiculous figures? They're the people that are running the country. The politicians in Westminster are almost hand bound. They can't make the decisions. If they do make a decision, it's sabotaged by the public service. What do they call it? The civil service. I mean, we've got a ridiculous station. We need somebody to clean all of that out. Yeah. We need somebody like Milei in Argentina, who closed half of the ministries. Just closed them. And said, okay, all these people and all the civil service servants, depending on those ministries, go out and get a job. You know, he's put them on the dole, a very modest dole, to keep so they can feed their families and what have you, but he's just closed it down. We need a revolution. And that, in a very more moderate form, would be somebody like Farage who would do that. I mean, not wishy-washy people like Starmer or Sunak. Maybe nice guys, but they're not leaders. No way. And this they're leaders.
Philip, I'm not sure that either of them are actually likable either, Harry.
I mean, I'm taking a very strong view here, but we need a strong leader. We need somebody to put an end to this nonsense. And the only person enunciating a clear policy in Britain at the moment is Nigel Farage. It's not a question of whether you like the guy. Can you think of anybody else? I challenge you guys to tell me anybody else that is saying what we need to do. Stop immigration, at least curtail it, or at least set the standards so that we're bringing in the right kind of immigrant, qualified people who will contribute to society, not be sucking off the hind tit all the time, like as we've got at the moment. We've got to his other policies on the nation's the economics, on what are important to Britain. He declares what his priorities are. Have you seen any of the others declare a priority? Have you seen any policy whatsoever from Keir Starmer other than to tax private schools? Can you name any other policy from Starmer? Can you name any policy?
And even that's not new.
And can you name any policy from Rishi Sunak? No, we can't. We can't. I'm sorry. Yeah. You're bright guys. You're a lot brighter than I am, and you. But we cannot name a single policy that these people are expounding that are going to say this is where it's going to take us out of the mess we're in.
I would agree with you.
Well, there you go.
Yes, and
it's the reason Harry's been hanging on.
I hope it would actually be for his wife.
No, that's calmed me down. I'm a beauty before the beast. I mean, that has calmed me down. I was getting on my high horse as I try to avoid on these programs because people don't want to listen to my particular brand of bull.
Well, they do actually, Harry. It's forceful views that, as you say, is required from our leaders that we're not getting. That people actually value, and that's the feedback we get.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what did I miss?
Well,
you missed the morning of going from because we want to know what you think about Trump, of course. the situation with Trump.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Cool girl, we put her on the spot. I'm going to try something here. I was saying earlier, Melissa, that I don't think you like Trump at all. In fact, I don't know anybody who does. But would a dose of Trump, even if it's only for a short time, help put America back on track, because it's wandering without any defined course at the moment under a weak administration? Would you agree with that statement?
Well, it has a course. It's just not a great course. So
Okay.
it's a very defined course, actually. It's quite defined.
Okay.
It's almost okay. So it's almost, so it's pro-migrant and free borders, open borders. It's also eliminating. It's also more leeway with crime. So there's a definite course that's going on. We may not like it. Some of us in the country may not like that, but that's the course. And then you see the pro-Palestinian protest. It's more anarchy. There's like, we want the freedom to do anything we want to do, kind of a thing. So it's a definite course, and it can be, and I think there's I don't know. I think that what happens is that these folks who are trying to put us on that course have never experienced being victims of crime, have never experienced having living amongst the poor, you know, and so there we are here. It's just you're looking at folks in their ivory towers. Oh, well, we feel sorry for the migrants, and we feel sorry for the criminals, and you know, they had a tough life, or you know, the terrorists, they had a tough life, you know. So we have to be compassionate. It's a little too. It's the pendulum. It's a pendulum, right? So we're swinging far to the left, and I don't know. So what would a dose of Trump give us? Well, you know, I don't know. I think that it would reverse the migrant issue. It would reverse some of the crime issues we have, although a lot of those are state or city laws, and I think we would be more pro-Israel, or more steady, and in some ways steady overseas, but not so steady overseas, because he's very unpredictable. You know?
I see. We were talking earlier, Melissa, about American isolationism. I feel, in my reading of it over the years, that it is ingrained in American thinking.
It's a thing about the geography where we are.
Ever since Monroe, the Monroe Doctrine. Forget, in fact, that was only 1/3 of the Monroe Doctrine, but there were two much more important parts to it. But the one that has remained through history is isolationism, and we've seen it right through to Wilson wanting to keep America out of the First World War, and Lindbergh wanting to keep them out of the Second World War.
Right.
So it's a thread that runs through American political thinking. Would you agree with that?
Just think about it. Just look at the basic. Just the basic foundation of that kind of a thought. We are geographically isolated from you. We are.
And economically, so you can exist as a nation without trading with anybody else. You've got everything you need. You're independent in energy and food and raw materials. You've got it all.
Although
I would challenge that. I would challenge that, because the Smoot-Hawley Act of something like 1929, 1930 was passed on that basis, that you could you boosted tariffs so that it was difficult for anything to come in from the rest of the world, and people threw themselves off the ceiling, the roof of the stock exchange. because it all went terribly wrong.
Well, it went terribly wrong. Well, there were a lot of reasons why it went terribly wrong in 1929. And there was a lot of manipulation and a lot of theft and a lot of greed that went on Wall Street. Let's be honest here. I wouldn't blame you. Wouldn't blame anybody outside of us for certain. But I think, well, I mean, we are very dependent still on China for goods, junk goods. Quite frankly, look at Amazon. Have you been on Amazon lately? It's all made in China. I can do without that, but certainly, because it's a lot of it's just garbage, fast fashion junk. Copyright infringements left and right, trademark infringements left and right. It's crazy. But I would say,
Is that okay?
yeah, I think Trump might bring a little bit of, I don't know if he's going to bring us to the middle, but there'll be this push-pull, far left, far right. Nobody wants to be a moderate anymore. They'll be shouted down because they're too calm. They're too logical. They're too logical. So yeah, everything is extreme right now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know that I was really that surprised with the verdict because it was such a vague. It was so vague because on the basis the business records really was a misdemeanor, and then they wanted it to rise to the level of a felony. So they added, it must have been, I guess in the commission of a fraud. We can't tell you exactly what fraud it is. You can't tell me the definition of the fraud? What? So the jury went back. They're probably very confused. But I don't know. It just a mess.
Well, I've got great faith in the future of the United States. I think it's a wonderful country, and it's a country where it's a mix of people, a mix of ideas, where when people join it, they become part of it. I feel it would make a mistake if it falls into the trap of multiculturalism, because that's everybody out for their own values, their own ideas, their own personal benefits, and there's no sense of national patriotism. I see the States as being a very patriotic country. You drive through the States and you see the national flag hanging out.
Quite a bit. Yeah, quite a bit.
Homes. And I think that says a lot. And Britain has gone into becoming multiculturalism, where we keep using this expression, the tail that wags the dog, and every little vested interest group seems to call the shots in that particular field. So it just fragments society. So I like to see a cohesive society that believes in itself. And to a degree, I think the epitome of that at the moment on the world scene is the United States of America. It was said that the 20th century was the U.S. century. Well, I don't think it's over yet. I don't think you should just simply take dates on the calendar. I think America is still the U.S. is still able to provide a very strong democratic in the generic term leadership to the world in face of all of these totalitarian states that are coming into being, very powerful states.
I think what's dangerous here has been that use of the judicial system, to go after a political opponent, and that can be kind of quite frightening when everybody decides to go along with it. I don't think that the Democrats are looking at themselves in the mirror. I don't think they see what they want their own way, and that's where authoritarianism comes from. I want my own way, and I'm going to impose it in any way that I can. So I'm going to use the judicial system. I'm going to come up with some novel legal theory as to some crime that this person we don't like has committed. So it's just that Trump is a nasty character.
It's not a likable guy. It's not a likable guy. But yet there you get into the political dichotomy of Democrats like to govern.
Well, govern
Republicans,
govern us into anarchy. Yes,
yeah, we need to
govern us
govern.
into.
I like to organize things. They have to have rules and regulations and groups and studies and all sorts of things and philosophies. Whereas Republicans, and we think we're talking socialists and conservatives here in Britain, like to do things. They put on the earth to perform two different functions. Now they're not mutually exclusive.
No, they're not.
You need society to be organized. You need the strong to help the weak. You need all of these good things,
Right.
but you have to generate wealth before you spend it. You to govern.
Really?
And
That's a
That's-
really novel idea, Harry.
That's just, I'll be honest with you, Harry, that's really not how people are behaving these days. They're
well,
not.
the United States at the moment is the world's most indebted nation per
It's
capita.
insane. It's absolute insanity. I look around and I just can't believe. It's like, and I'm constantly asking the question, when you see somebody driving around in a new SUV and they're drowning in debt, and I always got to ask the question, are you 5 years old?
Yeah.
And I can ask the same question. I can ask that same question of myself sometimes. I'll buy some silly things, but I certainly am not going to go into debt. There's no debt. I don't. It's like, what do they say in the Bible? The borrower is slave to the lender. I'm not going to be anybody's slave because I really want a big, huge new SUV.
Yeah.
You got to have some self-control. And I just don't think people have self-control. And honestly, I think a lot of it is the banks like to manipulate. There's the marketing, the selling, social media, everybody trying to keep up with everybody in terms of status and what they own and what they wear and where they live and the vacations they take. It's madness, really, financial madness. But anyway.
Well,
Anyway,
Melissa,
but I'm a big believer. Sorry, I was going to say I'm a big believer in the United States. I'm a real fan of the United States.
Well, thank you. Thank
But
you. We're not real fans of ourselves right now.
It has its faults, but none of us are perfect, except Keith.
Except Keith, yes.
I'm going to have to leave you
Well,
now.
Well, I just went from political commentator to doorman and back, so.
I love you and leave you because I've got a commitment to meet somebody, a lovely old guy who's old. Christ knows, he's 20 years younger than I am, 24 years younger than I am, but he's lost his sight, and I meet with him from time to time to try to put a little bit of magic back in his life. And he lost his sight and he's lost his wife within a very short period of time.
Oh my gosh, sounds terrible.
So it's
well, Harry, you've managed to charm another beautiful lady. She will have taken all your praise of her country on board, but Keith and I know you're only doing it because you want to take her out to dinner.
if I could get myself over to the States, I would. But no, but
bring your wife. Bring your wife. All three of us will have dinner.
Oh, there's nothing improper in my suggestion at all. It's just, but the point I think that comes to my mind, and it wasn't my reason for saying this about the States, but so many people knock the States. The States is highly criticized by lots of people, and I just don't understand why.
Who's criticizing us?
I've lived that. Well, people are jealous of success, I think.
Exactly. I just laugh.
I've lived in North America. I've traveled extensively in the United States. I've lived in Canada for half of my life, and I just think it's a wonderful country, and I think my comments are to compensate for these jealous types who not want to knock success. Anyway, that's my thoughts for the day. Well, God bless you all. I've got to dash off and do my little bit of a good deed for the day, and looking forward maybe to see you on Monday. Are we back on Monday?
Yes, we are. Yes.
Okay.
10 o'clock your
10
time.
o'clock, 10 o'clock your time, and 11 o'clock my time.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Well, bless you all. Okay.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
weekend.
Harry. A very spirited session as usual, and very, very welcome in a dull television world.
Well, I feel guilty saying some of the things I do because, well, I don't feel guilty, but I just don't want to offend anybody.
Why not?
Well,
Sometimes we have to.
You've just been saying that leaders shouldn't be necessarily liked, and here you are saying you want to be liked.
That's a good point. Very good point. Touche, as we say in France. You're absolutely right. Well, bugger them in any case. To hell with them. Okay, on that note, I leave you all. Okay. Bye. God bless you. Bye.
Bye, Harry.
Bye-bye.
Bye. But the Friday Jamboree is becoming quite an occasion. It's we range
Yes,
over.
I'm very disappointed in Maybe. Where the heck is Maybe?
Yeah, we're really going to have to give him a bad time.
He's going to get it in the neck for this, because
Yes, and listening to his wife. I mean, Monday was fine.
How dare he go on a holiday arranged by his wife when he should be on Mirador? Absolutely.
Listen. You know, happy wife, happy life.
Yes, I tried that in the week. I took my wife out to the restaurant of her dreams because it was our wedding anniversary. But thankfully, she did love it.
Good, very
She did
good.
love it.
Good.
Although, for me, because I'm very intolerant, it was partially marred by this Far Eastern couple, mother and daughter. Now, I was assuming they were Chinese. They could have been anybody. So, but they spent the whole meal on the table next to us, loudly into their mobile phones. The mother was on video stream, talking in whatever language it was, Cantonese, Mandarin, whatever.
It was probably Chinese. Their language is
Yeah.
they speak loudly.
Well, in the end, I and another lady on the table beyond them both made a gentle complaint. The staff said they could only solve the problem by moving us. So they weren't prepared to approach them. But in the end, the manageress, the lady manager, she thought like I did and said, enough of this. So she went up to them and explained to them the problem. And they spent the rest of the meal off their mobile phones, and not one word was said between them. However, yeah, happy wife, happy life. Yeah, it's not been bad for the last 48 hours. That might change with the wind, but we'll see.
So what's it like to be married?
Well, I'll put it this way. I would not like not to be married.
Okay, why?
Because I'm not very good on my own.
So she takes care of you?
In her own way, but she's not a slave. I mean, it's all equal here.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly as she still works and I don't, quite rightly, well, I am what we in England at least call a house husband, which I'm fine with.
Right, yeah.
I'm fine with. And I drive her to work and pick her up, but although this is her last term now, she is finally retiring. Sadly, I think by the time we're both retired, there could be a pending homicide case. That's my worry.
I guess I'm just curious. You know, what would make a successful marriage? Because it doesn't sound terrible from this side of the pond. So what is it that would create a homicide, so to speak?
No. we're very different personalities, Jackie and me. She is very easygoing. She's not weak, but she's very easygoing, very well mannered.
Sounds wonderful.
And very tolerant.
Sounds like a wonderful lady.
She is brilliant. She's very well liked. She has loads of friends.
Oh, good.
Whereas I am intolerant. I drink far too much. And I have very few friends. I am Billy No Mates, as we say over here. But in all seriousness, it has worked for 36 years.
Right, you made it work. So.
But I'm not just saying this, that's more because of her than me.
Yeah, she's the kinder, more tolerant person. I can see how that might happen.
I'm being quite serious now. There have been times when she really should have shown me the door. But she's chosen not to.
Well, I honestly, if you are shown the door, and that would be conditional love, no?
Well, there have been a couple of occasions when she's made it clear she doesn't want me around for a while.
Okay, so you have a little space. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Well, exactly. So I ate a very large portion of humble pie and stayed away, not for very long, maybe a week.
Well, I had a happy marriage for 44 years, but I only realised that I was happily married in the subsequent 15 years that I've been on my own, because I can't find anybody else to take me, and that includes Melissa.
Yeah, there is a slight geographical inconvenience there, Keith.
Yeah.
I
do love the Atlantic Ocean. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yes, I let the opportunity slip. She found somebody else that I introduced her to.
Yeah.
Well, it's always the way. That is true friendship, Keith.
Thank you, Keith.
Now,
I'm just always curious about relationship. I find it to be can be very perplexing. I can understand it from an intellectual level, but I think sometimes emotion gets in the way, and then it's confusing.
Well, it's ironic you say that, because it sounds like you think very much like my Jackie, because she takes the view, and she often calms me down by saying, "Can you not waste your energy with this?"
Right.
And
that's a lot of what it is.
Can you not get so wound up and anxious about this? In the scheme of things, it actually doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, I know. I agree with that. It can be very difficult to do that, though, because getting wound up, and I think it takes practice. Some people are better at it than others. So she sounds like she's a calmer person, so she can probably observe herself maybe a little better than you can.
Yes.
But it takes practice. Everybody could sit back and not become part of your thoughts, because if you can observe your thoughts and how you feel, then you really aren't your thoughts or your feelings. You aren't them if you can observe them, because what you can observe, you are not that. So if I can observe this table, I am not that table. But we become part of our thoughts and our feelings because they're very enticing. It's almost, it's almost like the thoughts and the feelings are like a thought bubble, in a comic strip. And we can see that, we can see it, but then we become part of the bubble and we can't get out. And we make ourselves miserable. I mean, honestly, we really do. Most of the time, it's not something from the outside that's making us miserable. It's something from the past.
Well, I have that problem.
I do too. I
have intrusive thoughts, subconsciously and consciously.
Absolutely, they're strong.
In the past, and Jackie doesn't quite understand that.
Yeah.
She sympathises, but she can't empathise because it doesn't really do that for her.
Right. Yeah. So
Um,
she either hasn't had the trauma, or maybe she has had the trauma, but it's
Oh,
just somebody who's
no, she
able to.
has.
So it's just somebody who's maybe able to observe her trauma and kind of, like I said, step out of it and look at the bubble and say, okay,
Yeah.
I see this. And the question is, do I want it to ruin my day and my life? So can I just let this go and kind of not toss it aside, but can I handle it?
Yeah, rationalize it.
Right. Or just say, okay, so it's here. Now what?
Put it
Now
in
what?
its place. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, you got to do it every minute of every day in order to get to that place where your wife is right now.
Well,
Yeah. Well, Valerie took the view that getting married was something that you did, and then you grew into it. And as she said, is she couldn't go through it all again. So better that she would stick with me, troubled though I am, than actually having to do it all over again.
Yeah, because honestly, if you are jumping from one to another, you're jumping from one to the other because you can't handle things that happen.
yeah.
Because they'll, everybody has their soft spots and they'll trigger it. And you're going to be the same with everybody unless you change. And then it could get better. But yeah, it really is. It's honestly, it's a practice. It's a practice. Every time that crap comes up, okay, that's not feeling good. All right, I know where that's coming from. You got to know where it's coming from subconsciously. And okay, well, I'm not going to have this ruin my day. I'm going to really move on and appreciate. A lot of it's like appreciating gratitude. I've got this wonderful woman I'm with. I want to appreciate this beautiful day. That often happens. So you identify it, right? You see the disturbance in your heart,
Yeah.
and your mind, and then you say, well, okay, I see it. It's there. But what I'm going to do is be grateful. What can I be grateful for right this moment? And just start listing everything. And I'll tell you, it takes you right out of it. It really does. You got to catch yourself, though.
Well, yes.
Do you know, just as brain is a goodbye, Ada. You'll be much missed. Now, Ada was the morning cleaner, and she left today, and she will be missed. But do you know the one thing that I will miss most about Ada, which is pertinent to this discussion, is she would always phone her family when she got to work, and to make sure that they were out of bed and that they were ready for the day and so on. And she always ended her conversation on the phone with, I love you. And I found that quite uplifting. It was a lovely, lovely thing to hear her saying in the background, love you. And I thought, that's the basis of a very, very good family unit.
Yes, that is wonderful, actually. And probably a very good idea for all of us to implement, along with the gratitude.
Absolutely. So Ada will be much missed for a whole host of reasons.
That's a good lesson.
My three kids, bless them, always end their conversations with me or their mum with "I love you," always.
I think that's
and
great.
It means a huge amount.
Yes.
I say, sorry, you've been too expensive over the years. I don't love you, but I'm very grateful that you love me. But on a more serious note, what really gets me, Melissa, is why are my instincts, my subconscious whatever, why is it so negative? Why?
Honestly, you have to thank it because it's there to keep you safe.
Right.
It's holding on to what is familiar and so if you have some trauma in the past, it's going to try to avoid the trauma in any way, shape, or form it can. And a lot of it doesn't serve us. And so you have to look at it not as your adversary, because that's only going to create more anxiety, and say, I appreciate, okay, all right. Let's just take an example. someone who has been abandoned in their childhood. So they feel abandoned all their lives, regardless of whether people have abandoned them or not. And so these thoughts, these intrusive thoughts will come their way all the time, right? Abandonment, 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 stop, stop, stop. So they won't get involved with people. And when they do, they're always expected to be abandoned. So if you could see it for what it is, okay, that's that abandonment feeling that I'm feeling. So right now I'm going to say, okay, well, I appreciate it. I know you want to keep me safe from becoming abandoned again. So you're keeping me away from people, but I don't need that right now.
Right.
You know, I appreciate it, but it's not me anymore. I'm not abandoned. So it's almost like a little bit talking to those intrusive thoughts so they're not your enemy.
It's rather spooky that you choose that subject, because a lot of my problems undoubtedly are because of the fact that I was adopted.
That'll be abandonment. That would feel like abandonment.
So I don't do rejection well.
Right. So if you can identify that I'm feeling rejected right now, right? That hurts. That hurts, right?
Yeah.
So, but the more you can step away from it and observe it and calm it, you're almost got to sit in it a little bit because it will dissolve, and say, well, am I really rejected? Not really. My wife's here. My friends still love me. So
exactly.
You got to talk yourself down from that rejection ledge.
Exactly. But there are times I have to say to Jackie, or even if the family are down, and as I put it, I've been bitten by the black dog. I have to go with it. I have to say, look, guys, this isn't a quick process. I've got to get it, let it get me down to come back up again.
Right. You have to kind of let it wash over you in a way.
Yes.
Not drag you into the bubble, because it's in the bubble. Rejection, be careful, right? That hurts. Remember.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, okay, I'm observing that. It's not me, but I'm observing that. Okay, I do remember. I do feel rejected. But am I really? No.
No, of course I'm not.
So if you could talk, you're going to have to monitor yourself and observe yourself all the time. But I guarantee once the more often you do that, the less of a sting it's going to have. And it's there to keep you safe. It's this familiar feeling. Let's keep you safe and away from people, which clearly you don't want, but that's what its purpose is. So, but
you should be a counsellor.
I got to counsel myself first.
I mean, on a slightly different, and thank you, Melissa, genuinely, but your brilliant son Connor was with us this time last week. Yeah. It was absolutely magnetic. What a guy. But he was very much of the view that Trump would be let off, would get off.
I know. And I warned him against it. I was like, I don't know.
And I listened to Connor's description of how the two main witnesses, Daniels and Cohen, conducted themselves and were exposed as this, that, and that, and this. Yeah. And I thought, and Connor described the indictments as well.
Very confusing. It's very confusing. They're trying to make a misdemeanor into a crime, and that's essentially what they try to do. Yeah. And they succeeded because the crime was so vague.
And in New York,
they don't like Trump.
Is the theory, although it's been pointed out, Trump, well, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but Trump has spent decades of his life personally and with business interests in New York.
Yeah, he's from New York. Yeah.
So Connor, and I agree with Connor, what he described to me, I thought, no, a British jury would acquit. A British jury would acquit. You've got too vague, too technical, an indictment, and you've got two very dodgy witnesses.
Right. No.
Acquittal. But no.
No, I think it was because I think the criminal side of that charge was just so vague, and they just didn't. It wasn't. And so I think the judge kind of led them.
Yes.
Yeah. To say, almost a little intimidating too, because the judge did fly off the handle, and he's apt to do that. He's unstable. So there's probably that in the back of their minds. You got to have very strong people to say, no, I don't agree with this, and to not waver. So they're like, whatever, it's not a big deal. He'll probably get probation. You don't know though. But I suppose they're not going to have his Secret Service folks in jail with him. So, and they,
he's not going to go to jail for this. Actually, in my respect,
you never know with these judges. You don't know, and you don't know anymore. That's the scary part of it all. You don't know.
Is there such a thing in the States as what we call a suspended sentence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where you're given a sentence of imprisonment, but it is suspended for a period of time.
Yeah, and of course, right. Then you have to come and serve right before your election. I mean, it smacks of that because it's right before the election. Well, let's just eliminate them, But when did this happen? 2016, 17.
Yes.
It's 2024 already. Why didn't you bring it before? It was because a lot of other prosecutors dropped it. They didn't think they could win something like this. It was too novel, this novel legal theory. Really? You're going to spend all that money to convict somebody on a novel theory that really didn't hurt anybody in New York? You didn't defraud New Yorkers. Are you serious? Well, we didn't know we didn't know Trump was a player, and there was no way we were going to vote for him anyway.
Quite.
It's such nonsense. It was nonsense. I hate Trump and I wanted to get him on something. That's all that is. That's not what we're supposed to do. It's not what we're supposed to do.
Even Biden said, so I read, that, politics is not about courtrooms, it's about the ballot box. But hey.
Well, it is about the courtroom now.
It is.
Yeah, sure it is.
That's the point.
So,
And what you just said interests me because early this morning when I was chatting to Keith, I took the view that it would never get as an appeal, that it would never get to your Supreme Court. But now you've just highlighted.
There may be some kind of an issue that could.
Yeah, well, it's what you just highlighted.
Yeah.
Like with our Supreme Court, that used to be called the House of Lords, if it's a novel point of law, so if, as you say, that indictment was vague, it was like new law, the Supreme Court may have a look at they may have a look at that.
Yeah, they might. So there are two statutes, and I can't recall the statutes exactly. Well, shame on me for that. Being in the legal field.
Well, it is 5:30 in the morning with you, so you can be forgiven, Melissa.
Thank you. Yeah, because it's a misdemeanor, and then we veered it into a felony. Yeah, and the felony portion of it is vague. So about the defrauding in the election, and then for the judge to want to restrict a defense witness that would discuss that, really restrict what they would be able to say, effectively making them mute to any of the real issues here. The judge definitely veered in the direction, not supposed to do that. Not supposed to do that.
Of course
and then of course he was there were 3 cases, I believe, he was involved in with the Trump organization. That's not random selection. So that's another complaint that I think a House Republican has raised. So we'll see. There are lots of different issues that you could have an appeal on.
Well, I think that we're going to have to see next week because it's time for us to hand Dex Pub back to him. God bless him. He's terribly tolerant and allows us to push the limits. In fact, last week we pushed them to 12:05. And
that's really naughty.
It was a bit naughty. So it's 11:15 here. 5:15 with you, Melissa?
6.
6:15. So I think that we've had a pretty fair run today. And once again, interesting characters in our studio, in our pub, and interesting debates and topics and views. So the Friday Jamboree has not disappointed yet again. We look forward to the Monday scuffle.
Yes, and I look forward to seeing Melissa in a week's time, all being well.
Very good. Have a wonderful week.
You too, Melissa.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Philip. Oh, you've gone. Oh, okay. Well, there we are. I'm back in control of the pub again because Deck has gone down to make sure the pipes are clean, that the beer is sweet, and that the pub becomes a pub instead of the political maelstrom that it turns into for the first 2 hours of the day. We will see you tomorrow, and not tomorrow, sorry, on Monday. We look forward to that, and another good day. And hopefully, now that we have got the holiday out of the way just for a minute or two, that we can have a full complement of the colourful characters that we have, from Colonel Chinstrap right through to, well, I don't know. Perhaps what we'll do is we'll put in a call to Donald Trump. Thanks for being with us. Toodle pip. And before I go, let me remind you of the quiz, which is on the 9th of June, Sunday the 9th, starting at 8 o'clock, a couple of quid. Great fun. And don't forget it, because it is getting in will be a problem soon because it's becoming so popular. All right, see you Monday.